Good morning. You're in Jasmine, and this session is Operational Templates for State-Level Attack and Collective Defense of Countries by Greg Conti and Bob Fanelli. But first, we have a few announcements. Please stop by the Business Hall located in Mandalay Bay, Oceanside, and Shoreline Ballrooms on Level 2. The Black Hat Arsenal is in Business Hall on Level 2. Lunch is in Bayside AB from 1 to 2:30. And don't forget the merchandise store on Level 2 and session recordings from SOC. They have a desk on every level. Please silence your phones, and remember during the question session that there are microphones in the aisles, and use those. Without any further delay, please welcome Greg Conti and Bob Fanelli.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for coming. We both really appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is my 23rd Black Hat event over 19 years. As an aside, that's a lot of backpacks. But when I first came, I never anticipated that we'd be in a position where we'd have to apply military combat planning techniques and military operational art to the security of nations in cyberspace because of real-world offensive operations that are going on and a really critical need for defenses, robust collective defenses where we work together. But that's what we've done here today. We've tried to look at both the offensive side and the defensive side to see where we are and where we should go. So I'm Greg Conti. My background involves a career in the Army. Currently, I'm senior security strategist at IronNet Cybersecurity. Prior to that, I did a career in the Army in cyber operations, teaching at West Point, and in the signals intelligence world. And this is Bob Fanelli.
So I'm Bob Fanelli. I'm a computer scientist and security practitioner doing product development with IronNet. And prior to joining IronNet, I was very privileged to have a long and rewarding career as a United States Army officer, with the final 4 or 5 years of that spent at U.S. Cyber Command addressing just the types of issues we'll be presenting today.
So really, this is our mission statement here. This is what the problem we're trying to address. How do we defend organizations? But more importantly, how do we bring those, as we look at those organizations as sectors, and all those sectors and populations as entire nations, how do you actually defend nations in cyberspace? And we really like this quote by Jeff Moss. It's from the introduction before last year's keynote at Black Hat. And it says, it feels like our adversaries have strategies and we have tactics. That's not very good. I don't like being in that situation. I don't like having no strategy. So what we're going to do, and we agree, and what we're going to do in this talk is hopefully provide some thinking above, that merges the tactics through the operational layer up to the strategic layer as one cohesive whole for the community. We have to warn you, we are going to use the C word. We're not going to do so indiscriminately, but it's a nature. So we'll be very appropriate in its use, no cyber pencils, no cyber drones or anything like that, but we are going to have to use it. Just to provide a little context about what we're going to be talking about, we're looking at three levels of warfare, right? The tactical, operational, and strategic level. And if you think about much of information security is hands-on keyboard work, small teams conducting, small-scale engagements, like a red team engagement, right? And if you look at the books, most of the books there are about hands-on keyboard stuff. But at the level above that, and we've used this in the past, where you start thinking, well, what are the campaigns that are taking place, right? How do these small teams form campaigns? And then at the highest level, how do those form national strategies? So what we're going to try and do is connect all three dots in this talk today. And this is part of a larger research arc that we've been on, that we've been kind of trying to contribute to the community because we see that there's really a need to bring it all together in one cohesive whole. And we're going to release the slides later today out on Twitter, and then the Black Hat folks release them too. But we want to show you that this isn't just an independent talk. This is like a 5-year research effort, and this is kind of like a culminating point, and then we're going to try and take it even further. But we've done things like take various facets of the problem and present it at Black Hat, ShmooCon, and other places. We do work on collective defense at IronNet. My colleague Dave Raymond and I put a book out on it, kind of all exploring this general space. We do training on it, and we get some awesome feedback from the participants every year. But more recently, it's these talks have helped inform this talk. We've been taking it to the sectors, right? The ISACs, right? We presented at the healthcare ISAC in the spring and got some amazing feedback, because you'll see ISACs play a role in the concept of collective defense. And then later this month, presenting on a variant at the Energy Sec conference. So I wanted to introduce a military concept called defeat in detail. You can think of it as divide and conquer. It's how a military force can focuses on one adversary at a time and takes them down one by one. And we argue that's going on today, that one by one companies are being taken down because they're not defending as teams. Yes, there are some initiatives and efforts, but we have a long way to go. You don't fight wars independently because you'll be defeated in detail. I think this is a great example. So on the left, you have the 2004 US Olympic team, some of the best players on the planet, apparently on Mount Olympus, but they lost to Argentina because Argentina fielded a better team. And when you think about where we stand today, we don't really have a team, right? So we have individual companies and enterprises, organizations of various degrees of strength. Our offense, all those companies have no offense because the government has a monopoly on the use of force. And we're going to continue to be defeated individually unless we do something. And then we're trying to provide a roadmap and a bit of a maturity model to show you where perhaps we could go. Because if you're going to fight, you have to, no military unit would fight as individuals, you need to fight as a team. And that's the essence of collective defense. It's the essence of NATO. And because we need a defense that's collective, because we're facing a collective offense. There are literally armies operating in cyberspace and a myriad of actors that are enabled by state level forces through capabilities or just law enforcement top cover prevents them being held accountable. Jason Healy has a great taxonomy of like 10 levels of state relationships, but it's that combined power that we're facing as individual organizations. In this collective offense, this is I want to show the scale and scope, right? So if you think these states begin, and we're thinking globally here, right? That they look at their desired outcome, the goals of their country, right? China publishes its plans. The United States publishes its national strategies, and then from that, though, they derive from the end state they derive what targets. And again, think at scale, right? This isn't red team. This is army level stuff. And then they build capabilities, acquire capabilities that far outpace any individual company could put together. They assign their forces, and then they conduct missions, right? And as a community, we tend to focus just on this piece of the pie, the kill chain, right? Or a kill chain, happens in the execution phase, but there's this whole other larger wheel that we need to take into account because that's collective offense. So that's what this talk focuses on today. The serious threat actors and those that they are, the serious state threat actors and those that they are enabling. Because we believe, like the stuff the community is doing now, the CIS Top 20, the various frameworks out there, are handling the basic blocking and tackling at the lower level threat actors. But the state ones, we need to do something different. And the state-enabled threat actors, we really need something different. Because not just their cyber capabilities, the teams that they are fielding, the states have levers of power that they can bring to bear and will use in these in support of these operations and achieving their national goals. This is just an example. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. The DIME model: diplomatic, informational, military, law enforcement, economic levers of power that they will combine with their cyber operations and their military operations to achieve what they want. And this is absolutely going on today. So, Bob?
So let's talk about some of the kinds of capabilities that state-level actors bring in. And as we put this list together, I was thinking, is this too much tinfoil hat, sort of fear, uncertainty, and doubt level stuff? But was gratified to see that many of the things we're presenting are also featured in other talks this week. So we're not alone in our thinking. One thing to consider here is undersea cables. These often go unnoticed, but they're essential to international, regional, and global connectivity. A single cable break can take weeks to repair. A coordinated campaign of destruction could cause considerable damage and lead to years of disrupted global connectivity. So having a Navy opens possibilities for denial of service beyond the wildest dreams of any botnet operator. And I guess one way to think about this is, does your red team have a submarine?
Don't give them any ideas, Bob.
Yeah, let's not give them any ideas. So mobile and satellite communications, as well as precision positioning services, and even some infrastructure control systems depend on having a relatively clean electromagnetic spectrum. Many states, though, can affect the spectrum on a fairly large scale, at least in localized areas. And a few nations probably have the capability to directly destroy satellites. Many more have the opportunity or the possibility, the technical wherewithal to jam their communication links or spoof their signals. So how many of you here work for a national intelligence service? Nobody. Right, okay. States can use the INTs to collect and process information to a breadth and depth well beyond most any non-state group. And that intelligence capability also often gives the ability to, an extensive ability, to recruit and use agents that can constitute an extreme insider threat. The significance, oops, I'm a little bit ahead of myself here. Yes, okay, so let me move to the next one. States can also apply outsized controls and sticks and carrots to create leverage on companies, organizations, and individuals to entice, to persuade, and in some cases compel their cooperation. The significance of room 641A is left as an exercise for the audience members. So operating or just having sufficient leverage over a national intelligence or a national level telecom provider comes with a position on the global network high ground and some exclusive influence over the network environment in general. Global connectivity depends in large part on the major players acting in good faith and being cooperative. However, an uncooperative entity can manipulate the environment for its own ends or possibly just break it for everybody. States can also exert influence over hardware and software supply chains, the things that make up the foundations of cyberspace. The potential exists to embed kill switches, backdoors, and other features into those foundations, providing an opportunity for a wide range of offensive effects and capabilities that would be difficult to mitigate. Note also, though, that the Bloomberg report on Supermicro, which we've depicted here, has largely been refuted. However, it does point out the sort of anxiety that exists over supply chain integrity. So a single attack could be a costly inconvenience. States have the ability to conduct combined operations where multiple well-resourced capabilities spanning the dime categories are coordinated and synchronized to create effects on a national scale. Doctrinal templates, or more generally now known as threat templates, have long been used in military planning processes. An example here, the template on the left depicts the doctrinal deployment for a Soviet motorized rifle division. The templates describe the adversary's preferred way to use their capabilities to perform the functions needed to achieve some objective in ideal conditions. And then applying that template to a specific situation assists in developing estimates of the what, where, how, and when for the adversary's operations. So we've adopted this templating concept for an idea of operational templates. And we'll discuss some illustrative examples today. We have a set of offensive templates organized by the threat actor profiles and the large-scale objectives. A set of defensive templates that are tiered based on the current and projected maturity of the defense, and a hybrid example that combines defensive and offensive aspects. So one intent here was to develop a way to see the picture, how these individual incidents and operations fit into campaigns, and how the campaigns can form part of a larger national strategy. So going beyond the tactical level that most of our current frameworks really deal with, and trying to get into operational art and up to the strategic level. So consider that the incident you are dealing with, which may be very painful, could be just a shaping operation in a much larger campaign. It's also possible to drill downward towards the tactical level, and this can help to tie in some of the more familiar frameworks we've been working with into a larger picture. An operation is often depicted in terms of a cyber kill chain, and there are many variants to choose from out there, but they all build on the original find, fix, fight, and finish concept from that dates back to World War II. Going a bit further, we can even get down to the level of individual tactics, techniques, and procedures for an operation and see how that fits into a kill chain and into a larger operation. MITRE ATT&CK matrix is one well-known example for various tactics. So this is a potential to assess individual TTPs up through kill chain operations and into a much bigger picture, hopefully giving us a better way to see the trees and the forest.
I'll hop in, Bob, too. I just want to underscore this. I think this is important, that we can go from TTPs, a set of TTPs supporting a kill chain or kill chains, and then link all the way from TTPs up to national strategy. This kind of completes the line, or at least that's what we were going for.
Yes. So this is a legend for the templates that we'll follow, the offensive templates that we'll follow. We've defined 3 types of lines of effort. So one for informational operations, one for cyberspace operations, and one for physical operations. We're also going to show major effects, which are having significant impact, things that would definitely get noticed, and minor effects, which may be much more subtle and stay under the radar. We've also used some time dimension and divided this up into 3 phases, an initiating phase or a preparatory phase, developmental operations, and then a culminating phase which would achieve the final objectives. One thing to note is the templates that we have today are somewhat restricted by the need to have legible, projectable slides. If we included all of the detail that we would like on these templates, we'd probably get something like the typical DoD eye chart slide.
So please work with us, okay? Like, don't say you're missing an arrow. Well, if you want it to look like that, we would have been happy to comply, but we try to convey the best, the key insights.
Does everybody have this? All right. So the first operational or offensive template is a critical infrastructure control strategy, hopefully a somewhat familiar case to everybody. The goal here is to get some degree of control over your adversary's critical infrastructure and use that to exert power. This could be for the purposes of deterrence or persuasion, maybe just to create an economic advantage, or it could be, in a more extreme case, used to create disruption or delays to augment or to provide you an advantage in an armed conflict situation. So this is the template. It shows the lines of effort organized by information, cyberspace, and physical categories. Note that the earlier efforts set the conditions for subsequent efforts as we go left to right. The major effects are enabled by the earlier development and shaping operations. And there's synchronization between the informational, cyberspace, and physical efforts are used to enable and multiply the effects of each. And note that the line of effort may have a relatively low probability of success, and so we may define a branching effort that provides an alternate path to achieve the necessary objectives or the necessary outcomes. And note that the accessing corporate systems line of effort here is an opportunity to show a bit of a drill down. So I'm going to show a little bit more detail here. This is a view of a kill chain, also with specific TTPs mapped under the kill chain steps. This was done by John Lambert, and I thought it was a really good example of showing how these TTPs and kill chain steps could fit into a specific operation. The second template is for a cyberspace denial strategy, also hopefully not a foreign concept. This would be creating a large-scale availability loss that hurts your adversary more than it hurts you. This could be as transient as sort of a dueling denial of service operations, or it could be as long-term as physical destruction of networks and systems. This template again shows the preparation and development efforts to be in position to create major effects when needed. So think about, I do some BGP operations to test out my capabilities, but keep it low enough that nobody really reacts, to be in position eventually to use that capability in a more major way if needed. Similarly, things like DNS hijacking. Another thing to note here is the cloud providers that we had down below. These providers take the security, the integrity, and the robustness of their services very seriously, but they also represent a really high payoff target set. So think of this, an insider inside of your cloud provider could hurt you very badly. If you've seen the news recently, what's in your wallet? Influence operations and perception management use cyberspace capabilities as intended rather than trying to break them. The approach here is to use the capabilities to deliver and shape information to persuade, dissuade, deceive, or influence. The object is to get the adversary to willingly act or perhaps to refrain from acting in accordance with your interests. You could think of this as social engineering on a national level.
Global even, yeah.
Or even global. So this template differs from the previous two a little bit by mixing the different lines of effort types together. The cyberspace and the physical lines of effort serve to develop the accesses and the positioning that would be needed for the subsequent information operations. Things like subverting the known information providers would provide a vector to deliver much more convincing messages later on. Similarly, creating information sources provides a parallel means to distract, pacify, or to deliver your desired messages. And we previously showed the possibility of breaking down cyberspace operation into a kill chain, but we can do that here as well. Well, we need an equivalent for information operations, and happily, Bruce Schneier delivers. Bruce wrote this article that was in Lawfare. It's worth checking out, that it really breaks down some of the steps in a kill chain approach for some of these operations, and also offers some suggestions or thoughts for ways to defeat or mitigate those attacks. I'd also note that yesterday Alex Klimberg did a presentation here that was very thought-provoking and went into much more depth in this area, so it's worth checking out if you have an interest in this. So the fourth template is the long game. This depicts having a strategy that takes a very long-term approach to reaching the goals. The intent is to achieve the objectives with the target never really realizing that there's even been a fight. A key aspect is using indirect approaches and deception, and most of all, avoiding efforts that would trigger a significant response. Got it?
So if you don't like the next slide, the next two slides, blame me. So this is a model I wanted to introduce because honestly, I think this death of 1,000 cuts that we're facing is occurring today against the United States, and it's very effective. If you think of our government's ability to respond, that tactical for government leaders is the news cycle, strategic response may be the election cycle. And if you can get beyond that time horizon, you can be very effective. So we put together something I call the staircase of apathy. It's if an adversary moves slowly and takes a series of steps toward their goal, the small steps aren't noticed or acted upon in any organized way. Right? Or if it is, it's very localized or modestly localized. But if you take large steps, that will be noticed. So in general, you try and take small steps, unless the value of taking a large step is, it's so high that it's worth the cost that you're going to have to pay. So looking at it graphically, you've got progress over time, and you want to take a series of steps towards your goal. And you want them to fall below the apathy threshold. And the idea is, what does it take to get the attention of your leaders in your organization? What does it take to get the attention of political leaders to change, something important, right? What does it take to get the attention of the board? So there's really multiple levels of this threshold for localized up to national or even global change. And as you go, let's take a look at something like CrossIt, the OPM hack, right? You would think that's a high payoff target. You get a database of everyone's 100-page dossiers on everyone in the United States with a security clearance. That's probably worth crossing the threshold because it's of a significant value. Or influencing the US presidential elections. That's another one, even bigger, right? But if you look at the and I know these are attributed to different threat actors. That's okay. I just put them in, we put them in as illustrated examples. But the OPM hack got people's attention, but for a limited period of time, right? Where the presidential election influence got politicians' attention because it was personal, and that's still ongoing. Okay, Bob?
So this is the template for the long game. This depicts using multiple parallel stealthy or non-attributable efforts that are designed by the final stage to achieve a significant advantage in one or more aspects of national power, those dime levers of power. Note the extended length of the first two phases here. These would probably be on the order of years, if not decades. It is truly a long game. The strategy also includes long-term development of physical access to enable and augment the cyberspace efforts. Think about this, getting your adversary to adopt your technology would certainly provide an advantage for these other efforts. Similarly, getting people you control in the right places could be devastating. Some may be inserted in long-term career paths. Others may be recruited, compromised, or controlled in various ways. You could gain useful personal information from this by doing things like hacking OPM, or hacking Ashley Madison, or perhaps just buying Grindr. The hybrid template depicts a defend-forward strategy. This involves augmenting the defense with offensive operations. This may include reconnaissance and discovery of attacker capabilities, action to disrupt an attack, possibly preemption of attacks before they occur. One feature of a kill chain model is the idea of identifying opportunities to break the chain to defeat attacks. Note also that in this larger cycle that encompasses the kill chain, that there are additional opportunities to deter, prevent, or to defeat the attacks. So this template aligns with the DIME instruments of power. Any of those may provide a means for mitigating an attack. Note that this is not a call for depending on hackback or some sort of preemptive first strike capability as an alternative to doing the hard work of cyberspace defense. The best defense in cyberspace is still a good defense. Efforts in the preparatory phase to do things like build defensible networks, create resilient systems, set up threat monitoring, and to establish collective defense capabilities are still going to be the most critical aspects of success here. The offensive efforts are also unlikely to permanently defeat an attacker. They usually live to fight another day. So it's more productive to think of them in terms of providing an interdiction effect that prevents adversaries from using their offensive capabilities at the time and place of their choosing. Defending forward can help by disrupting, delaying, or diverting the adversary's capabilities, and it's also possible that these offensive effects may have a deterrent effect on the adversary to continue what they're doing. In the culminating stage, the effects across all of the elements of power can be brought to bear to augment those cyberspace responses. In an extreme case, this could even include things like kinetic operations. One interesting thing is you may ask yourself, what's the most powerful offensive capability you've ever used in a cyberspace exercise? A CTF, a force-on-force, Metasploit, PowerShell Empire, MS 08067. I've had the opportunity to use a B-52 dropping live bombs.
In exercise?
On a range.
Yes.
On a range.
Yes.
All right. Greg?
Okay. And just backing up for a second, I want to emphasize that what we've created here are general strategic templates, right? And a way to think about the problem. Like obviously arrows, if you use this technique, you'll have arrows in other places, but we're trying to provide like illustrations of how this could be done in these general strategic categories. So on the defensive side, we took a little bit different approach, right? As you see from on the offensive side, we kind of reverse engineered what's going on now, and we think that there could be multiple ones more. We're not saying that's the entire set, but on the defensive side, we tried to look at how do we defend, where are we now, and where do we want to go? Right, like we took a different, so it shows that this template idea can be applied in different ways, and we used a different scheme here to like this is the legend, right? What graphic design techniques we used. You're going to see boxes; those are companies, agencies, enterprises, right? So red, amber, green for weak, moderate, strong. Arrows represent information sharing and interoperability, and then groups working together for a collective defense model have gray for weak, and then stronger orange, and then green. So I'm not going to we wanted to create an artifact that'd be useful after the talk, right? So I'm not going to thank you. I've been through enough briefings where people have gone through every single bullet. I just want to highlight a couple, and I think you'll get the idea. At the basic level, organizations are operating as individual islands. They're working toward the CIS top 20 controls, kind of the basic blocking and tackling. And if you're, and this is what it would look like. So we have the government on the left, private sector on the right, government's trying to protect itself, and a lot of red, right? And if you were attacked by a state actor at that point, it's a bad day, right? It may be the first time you've ever interacted with your government and asked for help. There may be people running, and if you've read stories about NotPetya, this has happened, people running down the halls, unplugging computers, general chaos, work stops, weeks to months to recover, critical shortage of experts in Active Directory to help think, on a national level to help recover. All of those things take place. At the evolving level, things are a little better. Remember, we have 5, so this is step 2, that the government's getting its act together, has some limited ability to offer an organized government response. Organizations have the top 20 controls in place. So what I'm doing just to show the changes, right? So this is 1 going to 2. Right? So you see, some changes. Reds turn to amber, amber turns to green. A little bit better information sharing occurring, right? Now, actually, you see information sharing occurring a little bit between the two. Now, level 3, systematic. Well, people are joining ISACs. They might have an internal SOC. They have improved sensor coverage to be able to at least know what's going on in their network. They have a threat intelligence team, right? So remember, this is kind of like a model of where we are, where we started from and where we want to go. So this is in the middle. So from 2 now to 3, again, we're seeing things changing, ambers to greens more, and increased information sharing. I didn't festoon this with arrows all over it, right? Otherwise, it would look like that eye chart that Bob showed. But I think what's interesting to hear is we have a pop-up to show that are organized around the ISAC, you're now starting to see people work together and share information. At this at level 4, advanced level, you see that, and this is kind of moving into the future. Like we could argue that there are groups at levels 1, 2, and 3. 4, we're kind of on the maybe heading toward that. Hopefully, that you can get sector level situational awareness of like what's going on right and left of you and what you're being attacked. What threat actors are threatening the sector now, and I'm talking like in automated fashion. And what I thought was interesting, we met with the HISAC people, they were talking about sector level SOCs. And and I think that's a very powerful concept, and I think it's really has potential. And you'll see that we've taken that here. So from level 3 to level 4. So 3, I'm sorry, I'm going backwards. Okay. 3, pardon me. Okay, level 3 to level 4. All right, you're now getting more clusters of people working together. And with that comes the ability to get the government's attention, right? Because if you're an individual, it's really, really hard, even if you're big. But if you're acting as a collective, you'll have a lot better response. That RFI is request for information. Could work both ways. You can work better across. And we say you have to work with the government because the government has a monopoly on the use of force. And otherwise you're just defending. And that's a recipe for ultimately losing. And just to show that we can zoom in, we want to show how these things nest, that you can zoom in and get to like that one sector we showed, you could zoom into another tier and show subsectors all organized, right? Like, at least this is the framework we're trying to create. And here we have in the 3 healthcare subsectors as an example. And at the sophisticated level, this is what we aspire to be. Right? And this is one, if you see us walking around the conference, this is one that we want to get right? Like, we're kind of projecting what we should aspire to be. And we go from 4 to 5. A lot of green, The government can put some degree of protection around its population. That we have not just requests for information, but maybe even requests for effects. Like the government, a prepackaged way to say, government, please make this stop. This entity is doing this thing against us, and you can request them to stop in some automated fashion, or request for effects, or vice versa. You may ask, why are there still red? Why are there still orange? Well, nothing will be perfect, even in our ultimate future. We live in a democracy, and we like living in a democracy. Our ability to dictate what people do, they don't have to do this. So there's a limit on how far even the best case can be. An interesting study would be looking at what authoritarian regimes or something like that could put together. If you could dictate mandatory online identities and dictate national operating systems or some such. We've spoken in terms of sectors, but this idea that we're proposing can be organized around cities, geographic regions. It can be organized around corporate ecosystems from suppliers to retail outlets. It can be organized around ad hoc collectives of any group that has a common interest. And we should expect these templates, kind of like Magic the Gathering card, there'll be different strategies of what will be applied against what. That we think there's value in linking to the TTP work. I really like that idea from the raw TTPs, MITRE ATT&CK framework, all the way up to campaigns. That would be very powerful to connect those dots. We want to refine this. We're not saying it's perfect, but we have vetted it in a number of communities to get it to this point where we're showing it to you and proposing it to you today. What can help, right? Well, I think we need to think in longer time horizons. Our view is too short. We gave a talk at B-Sides Long Island, and it was about pressure points that could take down cyberspace or take down countries. And if you look at it through a little tiny sliding window, you don't notice anything that's wrong. It's like, but if you extend that window over 20 years, you're like, oh my goodness. Pretty much everything's been probed, and you can see. So we have to argue that you have to take a broad, long-term time look at this problem. We have to, if we want to continue to be defeated individually, we have to work on the partnerships and the. Not saying this is easy. Like, we didn't say this was easy. We're just saying we're trying to map out a plan. And that we need to find a way to coordinate defense, and we have to have some offense too, and find a way to coordinate that government offense. That we're going to have to come together with some playbook, of ways we can work together. Doctrine, collective exercises where people have practiced, government across their sector, cross-company exercises, government people in the room. There are activities now, which is a good start, but we need to continue that. And we have to look at, I think, automated response. Everything is, if a human is in the loop, or if it's sneaker net, we got to get way beyond that. But on the other hand, we don't want to take a human entirely out of the loop and cause a bad day at the other end of the spectrum. So our conclusions, that individual companies, there's some great companies out there, and they could stand alone, or like Minas Tirith, it might be the last to fall, right? But we're better as a team, right? So we have to bring along the small, medium, large, state and local, and combine that with the real strong players. We have to figure out a way. We've tried to map out a plan for that. The individual heroic response, while great, and you give out medals for such things or bonuses, is not the right answer. And that we can win or lose this based on our preparations, right? So we have to prepare now for projected bad days to come. All right. So we welcome your feedback. We'll be around the conference. We think this is really powerful, really necessary, this collective defense idea. And we encourage you to think about these templates, that apply that stepwise model from TTPs and higher. It's a great templates that you see, reverse engineer what's going on in the news, and build your own, modify them, and also, to think through how we can really defend. And that's really the most important thing, I think, for us. Lots of people to thank. The HISAC community was particularly helpful. A number of people at IronNet, and external collaborators as well. All right. So with that, are there any questions?
Yes, this is a really great brief. Thank you very much.
Okay, yep, go ahead.
Okay,
Disembodied voice.
He's to your right.
right here.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right, good.
Yeah,
It's
excellent.
like, God, you're talking to me. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, excellent briefing. It's obviously biased according to, nothing negative, according to more of the American or, more democratic society perspective, I guess.
Sure.
Has there been any sort of assessment on how this, such a collective defense type of strategy within a democratic society would stack up against, let's say, a one that's more exercises more centralized control, including over the private sector?
So I'll take a crack at that. So we're working on time, like how we tried to include the right amount of content and not jam in too much. We worked on a level 6 authoritarian regime model or totalitarian regime model because there's a whole set of things, tools that they could do to their populations to make them more secure that would never work in a democracy. So if you watch the news and listen to the news stories coming out of, and I really don't like calling out specific countries, but the obvious ones apply, and watch what they're doing, national operating systems, it goes on, tests of taking their whole country off the internet. I've got a folder of 100 of these, and it'd be a great talk unto itself.
Yeah, but even that couldn't be seamless.
Oh yeah, sure.
Think about if you run enterprise network defense, something like that, you own all of the systems, you have the ability to dictate all of the technology and the policies, and even then, you still have shadow IT and exceptions and problems. So an authoritative regime could probably do more, but there would still be some shortcomings to that sort of a level of control.
Yeah, it won't be perfect, for sure.
Yeah, true.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other disembodied voices that would like to speak?
Kind of a follow-on to the question he just asked. It strikes me that it might be really hard to incentivize companies to collaborate when they're in fierce competition with each other. So it's kind of a follow-on to the sort of fundamental problem with democracy.
So you're right? This ultimately comes down to incentives, right? You have to incentivize. And that can be helped with government policy that takes things like liabilities off the table or provides protections. But there's, I think we are going to lose individually. The math just does not work. Defeat in detail is super effective when you're individuals to begin with. So we have to work through that. I think one way to think about it is you have an ecosystem in which you need to thrive. And if that ecosystem is disrupted, like if you're a bank and the bank down the street gets hit hard and they're your competitor, you're still having a bad day because it disrupts the whole system. Yeah, you're right. I'd say it's trivial, but you've got a good point. We have to kind of find intelligent ways. One way at work we've found is we focus not on the internals of the network. When we're looking at threats, we're focusing, what we share collectively is at the externals. Where are they coming from? And we've found really no resistance to that. So there are, with creative thinking, there are ways you can find areas of mutual interest.
And I think just an addendum would be, certain sectors are more amenable to this sort of sharing than others. Ones that already have an existing networked relationship. So think about things like the electric power sector or the financials, where their health and their operations are highly interdependent. So they have a much of a collective interest in sharing that information and mitigating their common threats. Some of the other sectors, retail, for example, certainly a point where retailers probably see a bad thing to a competitor as a good thing for them.
Yeah, healthcare is another one. I sense a lot of collaboration in that area. Good, yes?
Thank you. Very interesting topics and great strategies. You mentioned degrading disrupting, even dissuasion. Really interesting concepts, but my question is, do you think that there's any risk of, when implementing these, that it could embolden the adversaries to then use that as justification for future exercises?
We're talking defend forward here.
Yes, so I think there's certainly the idea that we probably need to explore of escalation control. This was something that was always part of sort of nuclear deterrent strategy of how to play the brinksmanship, but to not let things get out of hand. And there certainly could be this case. I think maybe not quite as much life and death, but I could see a situation spiraling out of control where those sorts of activities become you did this, I'm going to do more to you in return, and cause unintended effects. So any of these should probably look at how do we ramp things down and also keep perspective. The other challenge is the attribution problem, false flags of if I want to escalate to the next level, am I sure that I'm taking the step against the right target? With things like launching ballistic missiles, it was pretty sure where they were coming from. A cyberspace attack is much harder to nail down.
So we've got 40 seconds, and we promised them we'd end on time. So we'll be right outside. Happy to have any follow-up conversations with you that you'd like. So thank you for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.